So I work for a little company called Bonobo. Has anyone heard of us here before? 1, 2, 3? We're a small, self-funded, remote team. So we have a completely flat organizational structure. We try and do things quite differently from everyone else. We don't have any managers. We don't have any ops teams. We don't have legal or governance. At the moment, we're working on building a suite of digital products with Moleskine, the notebook company. So this is our calendar app, time page, and our to-do app actions. So it's not the most exciting of products in the world. Like it's just a to-do app and a calendar app, but yeah, we try and do it with kind of design spin, something a bit different. So one of the best parts about working remotely is this is my work environment. That's my dog, Ivy. This is a day in the life. So in the last few years, things in tech have moved really quickly. So there's lots of new tools, there's new frameworks, there's libraries, there's whole new paradigms, ways of working, ways of deploying apps. Does anyone work in cloud here at all? A little bit, just a few of you. Anyone undergoing a cloud native transformation? Yes? Excellent. So I'm sure the rest of you, those who didn't put your hands up, you'd know there's a lot going on. So there's cloud native, which is a thing I don't know. There's Docker, there's Kubernetes, there's microservices, there's serverless. Everyone's microservices are now using service meshes. They're all communicating via Kafka. It's all very exciting. There's so many changes just to AWS that people write weekly newsletters about it. Can you believe it? Like a whole weekly newsletter just about AWS. Okay, so last year I worked with Kubernetes a little bit. Felt like this most of the time. Lots of words I didn't understand, tools I hadn't heard of, blog posts about best practice that went out of date a couple of weeks after they were written. Anyone here used Logbungler, by the way? It was good, like back in August, but a bit out of date now. So this year I moved to Bonobo, and I've been working mostly in JavaScript and React. So I'm sure you've all seen the jokes. Well, it's true. It's all true. I created a new React app the other day, and it installed 1,026 node modules. So like just one command, 1,026 node modules. I hadn't heard of half of them, or more than that. I added a handful more packages for charting, for tables, and I visualized my dependencies just out of interest. So it's pretty cool. It looks a bit like a galaxy. If we zoom in a little bit, you can actually make out some of the names. So up here we have Lodash, and there's React scripts up there. There's React style components. If you zoom in over this side a little bit, we have our good friend LeftPad right in the middle, which is an essential part of every engineering structure. It's not just the complexity that's difficult, though. It feels like every week the libraries I'm using have a breaking change, and it's hard just staying up to date. So there's the battle between NPM and Yarn. We have NPM and Yarn fans. Any JavaScript people at all? A few of you. We have React and Vue, which I'm pretty sure did the same thing. There's Gatsby and Next.js, which I think are still like equivalent technologies. And more things are moving inside JavaScript. So we started off with HTML coming into JavaScript with JSX, and now there's CSS in JS, which is cleverly named. Oh yeah, the picture, this is Dave. He's a 35-year-old front-end engineer. He's smiling because he just got his Webpack config working. So this is a paraphrased, a bastardized quote from Roy Amara. It says, "We tend to overemphasize the importance of technology in the short run." And I think we focus too much on tech itself, especially new shiny tech. We learn new languages because of the elegance of the assignment operator, not because they're practical. We write new libraries from scratch rather than improving existing ones. We rewrite our class-based React apps to use hooks just because they're the new shiny thing, not like despite them not being officially released yet. I don't know if has anyone used hooks yet? A few people, maybe. every time we switch to a new language or framework, it's a new whole ecosystem. So we relearn everything from scratch. We learn new tools, new libraries, new ways of working. It feels a bit like a cycle. We discover a new shiny thing. We find it really easy to get started because it's new and quite simple. We start using it. We discover that there's a few issues with it. We're missing our favorite library, or we're missing this way of working that we like. We fill that gap, and it ends up taking a lot longer than expected. It's a really big waste of time and talent when we could be working on much more important things. So,
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
he's saying, yeah, dude, but that's just your opinion, man. Something like that. So, yeah, it is just my opinion. Obviously, that's what I'm here for, to share my opinion. I'm not going to stop you from using service meshes and Istio. If you want to do that, you do you. So I guess there's kind of a problem with this focus on technology, and I think it's a bit unhealthy. We increase the anxiety of developers by, we have this constant fear of not staying up to date because everything moves so fast now. We have this pressure to always be coding and have a ton of side projects on the go. It really raises the barrier to entry for newcomers to the field. It's a lot harder to get started with front-end development or DevOps with so many layers of abstraction and tools. I don't know, when I was 12, I learned web development writing HTML in Notepad. It was a lot simpler back then, and it was much easier for me to get started and starting building crappy web pages for, my uncles. And it also increases the tribal mentality between groups of developers. So we see this with jokes about PHP, people saying that Ruby on Rails is really good, but only 3 years ago. jQuery is so 2015. Well, this guy, he does things a little bit differently. So this is Peter Levels. He built Nomad List and Remote OK. So has anyone heard of Remote OK or Nomad List? Yeah? So they're fairly popular websites. They get 100 million requests per month, which is not bad, probably more than most of my products get. He runs all his sites on a single $320 a month VPS. He used SQLite up until a year ago. He switched over to Postgres, and it's just running on the same VPS as all his other stuff. Pretty easy. And his projects hit $50,000 a month earlier this year, so he's doing all right. His simple technology isn't holding him back. And his tech stack is PHP and jQuery. This product that he released is a single file of PHP with just jQuery running. His architecture is a single PHP file for the world's largest remote jobs board. So, he makes it work. So Greg Anderson said that you should focus on the journey, not on the destination. Joy is found not in finishing an activity, but in doing it. And I think the problem is that engineers tend to enjoy the process more than the destination, like Greg says to. We enjoy trying out new tools, learning new things, rebuilding our blogs in the latest frameworks, never to write any posts. Sometimes this comes at the cost of unnecessary complexity. And I don't think it has to be exclusive. We can enjoy both the journey and the destination. At Bonobo, we're heavily inspired by the way Basecamp works. Has anyone read anything by Basecamp, one of their books? Or read their blog, Signal versus Noise? Is that Basecamp? That's 37 signals. Anyway. So we come up with ideas for projects internally, and we pitch them to the team, and then everyone votes on which has the highest impact. So we do things kind of a little bit differently because we're a flat company. There's no product owner or scrum manager. Everyone can contribute ideas and pitch oh, hey, I think we should build this product. And everyone votes on which of the projects has the biggest impact at the end of the day, which is the easiest to build, which has the biggest potential impact for users, and which affects the highest percentage of users. It's something that we're inspired by a blog post from Appbot, actually. So throughout the 6-week cycle, we focus on achieving the project's objectives, adding and removing tasks from scope as we go, rather than kind of burning down in a sprint from 100 tasks down to 0. We can kind of add and remove things as we discover they're important or as they become priorities. So I found it a really good way to focus on just the cycle objective, just the goal that we want to achieve in that 6-week period, as opposed to getting stuck in rabbit holes and sticking to immutable sprints, for example. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project I worked on recently. It's an API gateway to cache requests from our app time page to a third-party weather service. So we were using about 1 million requests a day, which starts to get expensive at that kind of scale. We've got demo apps in Apple's retail stores around the world. So we have a lot of devices kind of clustered together in these small areas, and I think they were contributing a large chunk of the usage as well, because they always stay on. They have the app running in the background. They're always fetching new data. So when Rebecca here opens TimePage to check the weather, her request goes to my new API as opposed to the old weather service. So this is our app TimePage. You can see that it gets the temperature throughout the day and also the rain. You can see it's 17 degrees on whatever that day is. So architecture-wise, it's fairly straightforward. It's just a single service that has a cache. The requests to the weather service are expensive and slow, and the requests to cache are fast and cheap, which is good. So we want to keep things running from cache, and well, obviously, you guys know what cache is. So since we send location in every request, the API gateway rounds the location to the nearest 10 kilometers, roughly, so people within the same area get returned the same weather data. So rather than me and Ash here both getting out TimePage and sending 2 concurrent requests and costing us lots of money, the first request goes off, gets cached, and then my request is returned from cache instead. So it's a fairly simple app in terms of technology. It's running on Heroku, using Flask and Python, just because that's something I'm familiar with. Datadog, I punched in for metrics, but I'm sure you could use these guys or any one of the other metrics vendors. We're using New Relic as well, which happens to be a coffee sponsor. So that's just coincidence. They didn't sponsor me to say that. Using Redis as well, because it's fast, cheap, easy. And Sentry for error tracking. I'm a big fan of Sentry. I think it's a really cool product. So I chose these just because I've used them in the past and I'm comfortable using them. You could use Rails if you wanted to. I'm sure there's all kinds of hipster Rails micro frameworks like Flask. And even though we've got hundreds of thousands of people using our products, we don't have anyone working in ops. So we choose hosted services like these rather than running up our own AWS instances and setting up monitoring and tailing logs and that kind of stuff. We use hosted services so that we can focus on building products and building apps, I guess, instead of PagerDuty. So it was a pretty simple service, so it only took a couple of days to build. It has a little bit of client-side or server-side validation, just so that we can check that no one else is using our service. It shouldn't be. It also compresses responses in cache so that we can get about 10 times or 15 times more responses in Redis. And all up, I think it was 300 lines of code of Python and 200 lines of code of tests. So not that huge. And despite being a simple product, it's still fully featured. So it still has performance monitoring, application performance monitoring from New Relic. We have error tracking, we have log management. These guys do log management as well, I think. So you could use them instead of, I think I'm using log entries here, which is just a Heroku add-on. And continuous integration and deployment comes from Heroku. You can just git push up and your thing is built. And it's fairly scalable. So in terms of metrics, this is what the response time and throughput looks like. So we can get responses back to the user in about 30 milliseconds. The weather service itself takes 3 seconds, so I've excluded the 99th percentile metrics because they don't look as good. But on average, the throughput is 10 to 20 requests per second, so significant, I'd say, better than my blog gets. And Heroku makes it really easy to scale if we want to. So Heroku has this dashboard. You can just drag the slider over to the right, and it'll start charging you more money, and it'll scale out your number of dynos. So, we're using 3 at the moment, I think, which is $75 a month. And you can see that we've also got Heroku Redis, which is 100,000 weather responses in cache. So, yeah, pretty easy. Don't know if this is going to show the video. So speaking of scaling, we had a few issues when I first deployed it. We were getting these spikes in load, and after the hour, we could get up to like 3,000 requests in within maybe 10 seconds or something. So they'd show up like this, all within a minute. Most of the requests would succeed, but about 10% ended up timing out because of they would suddenly come in all at once. So this was TimePage fetching the next month's weather in the background at exactly a minute past the hour, a minute past midnight is what the user's time zone was. So we added a random offset from midnight, and it evened out the load. So we didn't need to set up auto scaling or unnecessarily add any complexity. And this is what our dashboard looks like. So over the last 24 hours, it's got 580,000 weather requests. And you can see that about 27% go to the weather service, whereas obviously originally 100% were. So it saved us 3/4 of our usage, which saves us a big chunk of money. And then this is Sentry. So I don't know if you've used Sentry before, but I'm just going to do a quick plug. Again, unsponsored. We're on the $30 a month plan. So for small teams like us, it's really accessible. That gets us 100,000 errors per month, which is like tons for our usage. Pretty sure we only have like a handful of errors, hardly any. This is one of the error reports. So you can see it's pretty comprehensive. We have the traceback, there's the code, there's all the metadata about how it was released, the Git version of the code that's running, that kind of thing. And the code itself to integrate is fairly straightforward. So you can see that here, we're setting up a bunch of config, and then here we're initializing the app, and then there's just these two functions that you can call. So either if you want to capture a message and say the user did something, or if you want to capture an exception. So over here, we've just got an exception handler, which sends any exception that was raised with a validation error and sends it off to Sentry. So pretty simple. But at the end of the day, this is what the user sees. So they don't really care how the weather service works behind the scenes. They enjoy the design, the animations, the sound effects. They just care about it working. Yeah. I'm going to let that loop one more time. It's a TimePage on the App Store if you want to check it out. So I really like this quote. People don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. So as much as I enjoy working with shiny new tools, I try and focus on what they can do, not just the fact that they're shiny and new. At the end of the day, the best tool is the one that you have as well. You can just use the things that you're familiar with to solve the problem that you have. You don't have to go out and learn something new just because someone's telling you to in a conference talk. And at the end of the day, it's what you build. It's design, it's usability, it's distribution that matters, not how it's built. It's okay not to use a service mesh. You can also go a long way on what some people consider boring or old tech. So, Django, Ruby on Rails, PHP, jQuery, they're fine. You can use them if you want to. I'm sure some of you would disagree, but whatever. I'm up here. There's also a ton of great services out there. I'm a big fan of Heroku. It's really easy. It saved me hundreds of hours of ops work. I don't have PagerDuty set up because I don't need it. So Dieter Rams says that good design is as little design as possible. And I think the same applies in engineering. So my personal philosophy, or that I made up for this talk, is as little engineering as possible. It's something that I strive for, and I hope that it's something you'll consider.